As the taxi pulled up to the old 9-story building, Emma, dressed in black, stepped out, her mind heavy with grief. She had just buried her mother and was now back in the empty house, feeling completely lost. Climbing the stairs to the 3rd floor, she unlocked the apartment and found her mother's coat and favorite bag hanging on a hanger. Next to them were the boots she had bought a few days ago. Emma held back her emotions during the entire funeral procession so as to not burst into tears in front of strangers. But when she finally got home, she let her emotions run wild. All evening, the girl mourned her mother and her loneliness until she fell into an uneasy sleep. As Emma woke up in the morning, she realized that besides her mother, she had no one in the whole world. For 10 years after her father's death, she and her mother had lived alone, struggling to make ends meet. Mia, Emma's mother, had no education and almost no work experience. She was a housewife who took care of the family while her husband provided for them. But after being widowed early, Mia had to start from scratch, taking low-paid positions and working at a factory, as well as taking on any part-time job available. Her only goal was to provide her daughter with an excellent education so that Emma would never have to go through the same struggles as her. Unfortunately, Mia could not save much money, and all the extra money she earned went to tutors. Now that her mother was gone, Emma faced the problem of how to get money for food and utilities. The weight of Emma's situation was heavy on her shoulders, and she needed to find a way to move forward. But how could she do it alone, without her mother's guidance? Emma realized that the only way out of her situation was to find a job. She wrote an application for a sabbatical and said goodbye to her classmates, who wished her luck. As she was about to leave, her friend Masha mentioned that her boyfriend's workplace was looking for a waitress. Emma was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to try it out. The next day, Emma arrived at the restaurant for an interview. As she walked through the empty hall, she couldn't help but be struck by the beautiful interior and expensive furniture. It was something she'd only seen in movies. Sitting in the owner's chair was a tall, thin woman in her 40s, dressed in an expensive suit with a perfect hairstyle. Her name was Amelia, and she gave Emma an unfriendly, prickly look as she looked about her previous job and experience. Despite her lack of experience and young age, Amelia saw potential in Emma's beauty and desire to work. As a result, she was put on probation. Emma couldn't believe her luck. She had landed a job in a beautiful restaurant, and even though the start was rocky, she was determined to prove herself. But as she began to learn the ins and outs of the job, she realized that it was harder than she thought. From juggling orders to dealing with difficult customers, Emma had her work cut out for her. But even with the challenges, she was grateful for the opportunity to work and earn money for her basic needs. She knew her mother would be proud of her for taking the initiative to improve her situation. Emma had landed a job at a fancy restaurant, and even before she began, she felt grateful for the opportunity. With her mother gone and no one else in the world to rely on, she knew that this was her chance to build a better future for herself. On her first day of work, Emma was nervous but determined to make a good impression. She quickly learned the ropes and felt confident enough to serve her first customer. As she took the order and brought the food, she noticed a fancy car pull up outside the restaurant. The doorman rushed to open the door, and a tall, middle-aged man stepped out. Emma learned that he was a regular customer named Carlos, who was both rich and single. Emma couldn't help but notice how the restaurant owner, Amelia, fawned over Carlos. Her coworker, Kate, warned Emma to be careful, as Carlos was known for having a weakness for young girls. Emma felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as she took Carlos's order, hoping to make a good impression on the wealthy bachelor. As Emma placed the menu on the table and greeted Carlos, she wondered what the future held for her. She was determined to work hard and save up as much as possible, but she also couldn't help but feel a bit of hope that her life might take an unexpected turn for the better. Carlos's heart skipped a beat when he saw the new waitress, Emma. Her face and figure looked exactly like a woman who had caused him immense pain years ago. The woman had left him just a week before their wedding, saying that she had met someone else and didn't love him anymore. Carlos had been shattered by the experience, but had eventually found solace in his studies, work, and his new goal, revenge. He wanted to become rich and successful to show his runaway bride what she had given up. As a law student, Carlos threw himself into his studies and took countless side jobs. By the end of his 5th year, he had started his own small real estate firm, which quickly took off thanks to his incredible flair for profitable deals. He became a rich and successful man, but relationships with women were the only thing he refused to let consume him. He couldn't forgive or forget his first love, and now this new waitress was a spitting image of her. Carlos couldn't resist the urge to make her his, and he knew that she would definitely end up in his bed. Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. Carlos, a regular customer at the restaurant, had just asked her out on a date. But there was something about the way he was looking at her that made her feel uneasy. She couldn't quite put a finger on it, but something seemed off. But for Carlos, something about Emma drew him in. As he looked at her, he couldn't help but think that she was a copy of his ex. Emma, on the other hand, was completely inexperienced with men. Although she knew exactly how such a proposal would end, she didn't want to offend a regular customer, so she replied politely as if nothing had happened. But inside, she was feeling a twinge of irritation. She had just started her new job and didn't want to complicate things. She was there to work, not to date. Emma couldn't believe the audacity of this man who had been coming to the restaurant regularly, asking her out every time. Despite repeatedly turning him down, he persisted, offering her trips, jewels, and even his own country house. It was all a game to him, but Emma knew that it was because of his past heartbreak. Still, she never got angry and simply did her job. However, things took a turn when Amelia, her boss, intervened. She watched the whole scene play out and didn't like how Carlos was treating Emma. Being in love with Carlos herself, Amelia knew that Emma might give in to his advances at some point. Emma couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for Carlos, but she also knew that she had to stand her ground. She just didn't want to get involved with someone who saw her as a replacement for his first love. Would Carlos ever be able to move on from his past? Emma didn't know, but she was sure that she wouldn't be the one to help him do it. Amelia had been watching all this unfold for a very long time, and because of her crush on Carlos, she decided to get rid of Emma. The next day, Emma's heart sank as she met Amelia in the hallway at work. Amelia's expression was icy, and she looked like she was ready for a fight. "Let's go to my office, and you can tell me everything," Amelia demanded. The two women sat down for an unpleasant conversation that left Emma in tears. Amelia accused her of stealing from the restaurant, saying that an audit had revealed a shortfall in the cash register, and most of the money was found in Emma's locker. Emma protested her innocence, but it was no use. Amelia didn't want to hear it. "Get out of here. You're fired," she said sternly. Emma couldn't believe what had just happened. It was all a nightmare. She thought back to how she had been so grateful for the job when she first started. Amelia had taken her on without experience or seniority, and now this was how it had ended. Emma felt like her whole world was falling apart. As she made her way home, she took out an old photo album with pictures of her mother. She wanted to forget everything that had just happened, but then something fell out of the album that caught her eye. It was an envelope addressed to her. "Hey there, Emma. If you're reading this letter, I want you to know that I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this sooner, but it's important that you know the truth now that you're alone. When I was 19, I made a mistake that I regret every day. I left my fiancé just before our wedding and didn't know that I was pregnant with you. But then I met Ivan, who loved and cared for you as his own daughter. He was an amazing man who knew that you weren't his biological daughter, but loved you just the same. But now that you're an adult, you have the right to know the truth about your real father. His name is Carlos, and he's a successful businessman in our city. You're not alone in this world, and if you ever have difficulties or problems in your life, you can turn to him for support. I hope that he accepts you, and that you two can build a relationship. If that ever happens, please apologize to him for me. I know it's too late to go back in time, but I'm truly sorry for everything. Take care of yourself, Emma." With trembling hands, Emma read the letter from her mother, tears streaming down her face. She was shocked to learn the truth about her real father, Carlos. She couldn't believe that her mother had kept this secret from her for so long. Emma whispered to the photo of her parents, questioning why her mother hadn't told her earlier. Emma was filled with a mixture of emotions, one of which was shame. How could she face her own father after learning that he'd been hitting on her and treating her as a sexual object? Despite this, Emma made the decision not to tell him the truth. The following day, Emma started to look for a new job. However, things didn't go as planned. She went to several interviews but was rejected at every turn. Emma couldn't help but feel like her life was falling apart. Emma's mind was in turmoil as she returned from yet another unsuccessful job interview. But as she approached the entrance to her apartment building, she noticed a familiar Jeep parked nearby. Her heart sank when she saw Carlos get out of the car, holding a bouquet of flowers. "I know you're in trouble," he said with a knowing smile, but his words only fueled Emma's resentment and pain. In a fit of anger, she snatched the flowers and trampled on them, shouting at Carlos that she had done nothing wrong and that she would not be bought. Later, when Carlos showed up at her door, Emma was still crying and feeling overwhelmed. After a moment of hesitation, she let him in and handed him the letter her mother had written before she passed away. As Carlos read the letter, Emma could see the mix of emotions on his face. She had always known that he had loved and hated her mother, but now she was faced with the truth about her own origins. Upon finishing the letter, his countenance shifted to one of sorrow. "It's difficult to accept that she's gone, and I'll never have the chance to see her again. I've dreamed of our reunion countless times, only for it to end up like this," he expressed with a heavy heart. "Emma, I apologize. Please don't reject me. I realize you're my grown daughter whom I haven't had the chance to get to know, and I've offended you many times with my unpleasant comments. But I'm willing to make amends now. I promise." Emma remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Despite his faults and past transgressions, she acknowledged that he was her father, her flesh and blood. She recognized that he wasn't a terrible person, but one who had been through life's struggles and was infused with cynicism. At that moment, she resolved to put in the effort to establish a connection with her father. It would take time, but she was determined. "Shall we go have some tea?" the girl whispered, wiping her tears. They left the room with a glimmer of hope for a brighter future. Thank you for joining us for this captivating tale. We hope you enjoyed it and were able to connect with the characters and their experience.